Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and in this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about relationship envy. Relationship envy. You know, have you ever looked across the room and you see two people getting along really well and you kind of wish that was your situation? Well, you know what? It's happened to me. I've sort of been on the short end of that. My significant other look at me and say, they wish that our relationship was like that. And I tell you what, I felt a little bit defensive because I think the thing that was happening is that she was seeing their public face. Well, the relationship that she happened to be talking about was a couple that had been together many, many, many years. And obviously they have worked out some of their differences. In fact, that particular couple had been together 40-something years. And I certainly had not been around long enough to have had something like that. Although I considered them a great couple, I just thought it was difficult to be compared to something like that. And but I did sit down and talk to the gentleman and get some idea of how he and his wife had worked out being together so long and having the success in their marriage. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But one of the things that happens is when you're having sort of a rough time with your partner in trying to work on some of, and say maybe you've read a book together or trying to work out on some of the issues. Maybe you've been in counseling or maybe you've tried some of these things, going to the park, taking trips. And it seems like all of these things are just supposed to work magic. Well, what you find out is that they don't. You still have to bring yourself to the conversation, being open and honest and things like that. But it's looking at those relationships from the outside and really trying to figure out what works. And it's an amazing thing, again, to be on the outside and wonder, how does this happen? How is it that they were able to do something that we don't seem to be able to have? And, from the conversations that I've had, number one is to expect that you're going to hit a rough patch. There's things to understand about relationships. Everybody has an opinion. Your partner, do you have an opinion about something? You have one. And when there's differences, it's understanding that those differences don't necessarily have to split the relationship. I mean, some people are very, very, very invested in their opinion. And when you're dogmatic about something, it's a bit of a turnoff. Now, when you've been in a long-term relationship, sometimes you just get to where you kind of understand your roles and you don't necessarily get into combat mode. You don't necessarily challenge everything they say because you just don't want to have the argument. So you learn invariably how to make peace with that. And it's, you pick your battles is something that comes to mind in terms of a slogan. But when you haven't been in a long-term relationship like that, how do you sort those things out? And if you've come from a different kind of relationship where you've discussed things in a different fashion and it didn't work, well, when you're in a new relationship, you don't necessarily want to carry those old habits forward with you. And a lot of this work actually starts before you get into the new relationship, but it starts by understanding that we are all individuals. We come to a relationship bringing our whole self, our total self, and getting to learn what some of those bits and pieces are. If you're a person who's known to be very quiet and not necessarily out there in terms of being very big in the personality department in the relationship, well, hopefully your partner recognizes that and is not going to try to beat it out of you, but develop a speaking style that relates to you. Now, if on the other end you're the kind of person that talks that's really loud and really boisterous and seems to be really dominant in the relationship, then you're probably not going to get a whole lot of challenge. But something that I would emphasize is when you're working out problems, you do it in private. That's something that learning when you've seen successful relationships work out, that's one of the things they do. They have their differences, and when you're looking at them across the room, everything seems to be perfect. Well, what I'm suggesting to you is that when they have a problem, they work on it in private, get the details squared out, and then decide how they're going to come out together and put a face on it in public. Because airing your dirty laundry out in public is just that, and you become a spectacle. And being embarrassed like that, that's not something you tend to forget. It tends to stick with you. And then you look at it and you see that your significant other is the one that put you in that situation. And it's hard to kind of sweep that under the rug. It doesn't seem to go away. So you don't want to be that person. So learn to handle your business in private. Learn how to work on problems. Learn how to listen to your partner. And when you start to begin to put those things in place, you not only become that example of how to be in your relationship, but then there may be another couple across the room looking at you, having a little bit of relationship envy. And wouldn't that feel nice to have somebody come up to you and ask you, how do you problem solve? Well, one of those things, as I had asked that gentleman and his wife, how did they work through things? It was, as I'd mentioned, they talked about their problems in private. They admitted that they have differences, but they also recognize that they love each other and there's a lot of common ground. And it's to say that they've decided that they're not going to let those things separate them, that sometimes things are hot button issues, and sometimes those things are things that have been a problem for a long time. And you tend to chip away at it. You can't take off the whole side of the mountain when you're trying to have some of these conversations about some of the bigger things. You try to break it down into smaller pieces and take it at that. And I've shared this before too. Sometimes you just can't solve the problem all today. You might have to take a break, take a time out, because when you're digging at these things, there's lots of layers to it. Because it could be something in the way of money, because kids, sex, and money are three things that relationships people have been having disagreements about throughout the ages. And it's those things that are ongoing. And over time, you may find out you can introduce different types of solutions. That's always something to hope for. And in fact, having hope in the relationship, that's a good thing. And you want to be that person who can bring that positivity to the relationship. I think your partner would appreciate that. And if you're the person that tends to be more the worrier, well, take heed or accept that your partner is trying to lift you up. I mean, that's a nice thing when somebody's trying to go the extra effort to make you feel good. And but again, that's not sweeping it under the rug, but that's just trying to keep a positive face on this. Because if we're both feeling depressed and we're both feeling like this thing isn't going to work out, well, then we're going to need a parachute. We're going to need some rescuing. And counselor's a good person. Maybe we need to bring in some of the tips that we've got from the self-help book that we've been reading that's probably sitting on the shelf. We need to pull it back down and start reading it again and get on the same page with this. And sometimes it's good to just take a break from it all, go out and do something together, something fun, something lighthearted, something that you can take your mind off the problem and change your attitude, and then come back and try to deal with it. Because when you're in a different state of mind, you're in a better frame of mind to handle problems, you can probably work through it a little nicer. Because the thing that when you get through with these conversations, you don't want to feel like you've been rid hard and put away wet. You don't want to feel all bruised and chafed, because it takes a while to heal from that. And emotionally, when your partner's starting to build some resentment towards you about how those problems get solved, it becomes something that is harder and more difficult to put away. So that's what I'm suggesting. Those are my tips. And we'll be right back after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
You know, here's something that has come up from time to time, and I think we've all experienced it, but it's the procrastination that comes with when you're feeling vulnerable. If you happen to look at a person and you feel like you want to go and meet that person, you probably better get on the stick, because here's what happens. When that person is available, they're available, and when they're not, they're not. And you don't know until you kind of put yourself out there to find out what's going on. And the procrastination behind this is something that many songs and many movies have been written about that. It almost reminds you of that unrequited love, but you have to put yourself out there in the world in order to be discovered sometimes. And in the dating world, the procrastination and what's that like? Well, you know what? That's when you don't take action, and that can happen for a lot of reasons. If you've recently come out of a relationship, you probably need to be doing the work. That you probably don't fall under the procrastination part of this, but you need to be doing work on yourself so that when you get back out there, you're not going to be having the relationship problems that you may have had in the past. But with regards to someone that has some fears, you probably have that because you're emotionally, you've been injured somehow, and you need to find out why you don't have the self-confidence to go out there and put yourself out there and give it a shot. I think what's attractive is when people take risks. That's attractive. That's sexy. Think about it. The person that's the wallflower, you've been out to a place, it's a club, the music's going, you've got people that are out there dancing, they look like they're having a good time, and then you have those that are standing against the wall with a drink in their hand or nothing. They look bored. They look like they're waiting for somebody to come out and get them. And that's, you may get the token dance. Somebody may come over and pull you off the wall and dance with you on the floor just to keep you from looking like a wallflower. But it's really those that are willing to come off the wall and take the risk. Now, you get out there, you may ask somebody to dance, and they don't want to dance with you. Hey, you know what? Take it. There could be a lot of reasons. They could be with somebody else, or they may just not think you're their type. Well, whatever it is, don't take offense. Go back to the wall and look for the next person. But it's about getting out there and taking a risk, because again, that's sexy. So how are you going to do that next time? Well, you're going to go out there with the confidence that you don't have to be the best dancer on the floor. And guys, women will say, you don't have to be the best. You just got to get in motion. And the thing that I've always said, people see dancing. You ever watch animals? Animals get out there and they strut their stuff because they want to be seen. Peacocks fan out their feathers so that the female peacocks can see that. And it's the same way that some guys are on the dance floor. They get their flashy clothes on, they got their colognes going, and animals put out scents to let them know that it's a mating season. Women wear perfume to be more alluring, to be more attractive, to create a memory. Well, you know what, guys, you can do the same thing. You wear your cologne, put on your flashy shirt, get to moving around, and that's how you get seen. See, that's sexy. Women are attracted to that. I'm not saying every woman wants that approach, because it's not about being a cad. It's really about taking the risk, being a gentleman, but getting off the wall and being vulnerable to the rejection. Because you know what? Oftentimes, rejection is not personal. It's very subjective. You have to look at it from the standpoint that the person that says no has an idea in their head about what they want. You have an idea in your head about what you want. But if the two don't match, okay, now you know. But if it does, you take a chance, you kind of make the move, and you get together, you're out there on the floor, you're having a good time. Hey, you never know what can happen. It could be the beginning of a beautiful relationship. One of the things that I've had the pleasure of seeing is two people when they first meet and then see that relationship take off and go a beautiful direction. I've had the pleasure of seeing that many times, and people have come back to tell me about how their relationship began, and years later they've gotten engaged, got married, and have gone on to have kids, and that's fantastic. That can be your story too, but it's about putting yourself out there. One of the things that I also think about is that's the relationship procrastination, trying to get you to turn things around. There's also the relationship disasters. Now, that topic covers some of the don'ts in a relationship, and some of them are pretty obvious. When you're with someone, respect them. Don't not respect them. Clearly, you start to talk to your person like you don't care about them. You start to treat them like dirt. I mean, that's only going to last for so long. I mean, everybody has a hiccup every now and again. But when those things turn into something that's long lasting, your relationship is headed downhill. I mean, expect it. Another thing, don't steal from your partner. I mean, can you imagine that? You got a joint checking account, joint savings account, whatever it is. You start pilfering things out of that account and taking off with it. I mean, it's not like they're not going to find out. Of course, there are lots of relationships where one person handles the money, the other person doesn't. But I mean, come on, you're going to steal from your partner? Because if you take from them, you're also taking from yourself. Really, you consider that. Another don't. Well, don't choose your friend over your partner. Now, this is something that it's not something I had ever done myself, but I've certainly heard about it. Don't choose your friend over your partner. I mean, look at this. Here's a situation in which man and woman have been together for years, and the guy decided that he was going to loan his friend $5,000 out of an account that his wife had. And I mean, and his wife actually said no. I mean, can you imagine the guy went and did it anyway? Well, go figure. He obviously wasn't thinking very clear. But not only did he take from himself doing that, but honestly, he took from his wife, and she had expressly said, no, don't do this. And this is somebody who was being bailed out by the husband, who had been bailed out before. Now, she knew that this guy was a deadbeat. He wasn't going to give the money back. He wasn't somebody who was reliable. He wasn't somebody she even wanted her husband to be involved with. But because the husband, he was a friend, he continued to be involved. But he took his friend's side instead of his wife. Well, that thing turned out to be more of a disaster than it already had been. And he was sorry for that, because at that point in time, she decided she was done. And how many times did he have to screw up before he realized that he was doing the wrong thing? Well, at that point, when she decided she was going to leave the relationship, that's when the light came on. So again, if that's you and you're doing that kind of thing, stop it. It's, you don't sneak the money and give it to someone else, because again, sex, kids, and money, those are three things in a relationship that are pretty important to the relationship, and you don't do that for somebody else. Another thing that's a relationship no-no is actually taking your business out and talking to other people. I think you make a mistake if it's a therapist, somebody that's trained to listen to these things and give you some objectivity, then that's a safe person. But remember, when you're putting your business out there and into the world, into the public eye, then you're going to get feedback, and it can be pretty embarrassing for your partner to discover that you've been talking about them and they hear it from somebody else. Because here's one of the things that if you haven't figured it out, the world is fairly small, and information gets out there and it comes back to you in all kinds of ways. And usually when you're talking the stuff, it doesn't come back the way you said it. it comes back in a whole different version. And it's usually not very nice because that's just how the world reflects things. And you got a lot of making up to do. Really keep your conversations about your relationship and your partner with your partner. Because if you're having that with somebody else, then what you're doing is that you're exposing yourself to something that you have no control over. And containment in a relationship is very important. And containment is a word, like say, if you're having an argument with your significant other, keeping that thing contained is important, because when people start getting loud and yelling and screaming, okay, now you no longer have containment, because now you've lost, I guess unless you're a yeller and you kind of already understand that about your partner, they're high energy. But I'm talking when things get out of hand. You see, it's hard to get the genie back in the bottle. Of course, you don't generally get the genie back in the bottle unless the genie wants to go back. But on that note, it's really important, again, that you have some sort of containment on this. And there's ways to do it and there's ways not to. And the relationship disaster things, talking about your stuff to the wrong people, putting your business out there in the streets, stealing from your partner, those are things that you don't want to be doing, because that shouldn't be you. You really need to maintain some sense of direction and, stick to that. Because at least if there's a breakdown in communication, you can always go back to the fact that you've been good to the relationship. Because there's three things. There's you, there's the other person, and there's a relationship. There's the three entities. And respecting that, see, it's like a three-legged stool. If one of those falls apart, then obviously it comes apart. But you and your significant other are the two legs. The relationship is the other leg, and you wanna keep that intact. Okay, you don't want to go out and get another person involved in this, because then it just distorts the whole perception. Because people who, if you're telling a friend, let's say, they relate to things through the filter of their own life, and far be it for them to have the same kind of experience that you've had. So giving you advice about that, concrete advice about that is really, really, really dicey. And of course, now there are a lot of well-intentioned people, but again, taking that outside advice from somebody who's not a neutral person can subject you to all kinds of misunderstandings, and they may even misinterpret what you're telling them. And you know what? This is something that happens too. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody come back to you with a conversation about something? You've been having a breakdown, and then you've been trying to work things out, and you come back and you say, okay, well, I'm saying this, that, and the other. They know that you've been talking to somebody, because it might not even sound like you. And if you can't qualify it and say, oh, well, this is a therapist, we're seeing, something that you have agreed to do, and it's just some third-party friend who's giving you the advice, your partner's going to feel pretty cheated on. And then you really have the breakdown of communication. And we don't want to go there. We're trying to make it better, not worse. So I'm suggesting leave the third party out. Don't put your business out in the street. Talk to only a neutral party. And, don't steal from your partner. And I'll be right back after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
One of the things to learn how to do is to put fun back in your relationship. And have you considered, how do you do that for yourself? Well, just go back to what it is that brought you together with that person. Clearly, there was an attraction there, and whether you think back to the vision that you had spending time with that person. Was it going to the beach? Was it taking a trip somewhere? Was it playing frisbee, playing in the yard with the hula hoops? Whatever it is, think about that and bring that to the relationship. There's enough out there that is stressing you out. There is enough that tears at you, and being tired, being stressed, being frustrated, and all of that the world throws at you. Your partner is the one person you want to be able to rely on. So bring some fun back to the relationship. Going to a movie is one of my favorite things to want to be able to do. Go to car races, air races, play hopscotch, volleyball, take a bicycle ride, take a drive. Just go sit out in the park and enjoy something, whether it's, sitting next to a body of water. That's usually pretty peaceful and calm. If you got a boat, then go out on the boat, find a spot, drop the anchor, and just kind of chill and just kind of let the water just kind of make the boat rock back and forth. If it's time to take a vacation, then it's time to take a vacation. Make your partner a priority, because that feels good. One of the other things that happens, and this is sort of a seasonal thing, some people really like fall. Right now, this is podcast number 9 for me, so it's the summer of 2016. And not too long, if, depending on where you're listening at, and not too long, depending upon where you're listening, their kids are going to be going back to school. And that's sort of a signal of fall. Now, some people really love the fall. They'll take a trip to the East Coast because the changes in the seasons tend to happen there, because you kind of get that cold snap and you can see the leaves go from green to all of their fall colors. So again, travel, that's the really neat thing for some people. Something that's a little more local, if it's getting a massage, the couple, the pair, go get a massage, both of you at the same time. Go get a massage, and you can kind of enjoy that together. And afterwards, either go to lunch or dinner or something, and have a good romp in the sack. Enjoy yourselves. Go to the fair. Some people don't grocery shop together anymore. I remember when. Well, let me stop that telling that story. Let me stop that. One of my favorite things to do is actually to take a drive. I tend to do some creative thinking during the drive, and I also tend to not think. So I don't have the cell phone going, and the not thinking part is just to clear my head, because I tend to be pretty busy and up in my head a lot thinking about things, and driving is calming, it's soothing. Some people like just playing music, meditative music or classical, and hey, plan on going to a concert. Those are the things that can, and I'm talking about doing these things as a couple. Now, I mentioned the drive thing for myself, but that's just an example of something you can do with your partner and share that experience and actually go see things together. Museums are great. They're out there, and they can probably really love to have your patronage. Art exhibits. And what's another thing that happens for people? You have farmers markets. Those are real popular now. And you can get out, and everything is a lot less expensive. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg. You can fly nice flowers. You can prepare, grab things to make a meal in the evening. And, that sort of rekindles that little spark that you got going to make the relationship fun and interesting. And I don't know anybody that wouldn't want that. Because at couple time, it's it's the one-on-one time is what makes it special. In having that creativity, and if your partner suggests it, then go for the idea. Okay, don't be a spoil sport. It seems like there's always time to do everything but pay attention to the relationship, and it seems like for a lot of people that getting the relationship was important, but hanging on to it seemed to be, it's just a given, like it'll always be there. And I'm not here to suggest that that's the case, because I've certainly had relationships leave because I didn't pay attention to it. And that's a hard lesson to learn. That's really a hard lesson to learn. And it's not one that goes away very, very quickly. It stings. To all you lovebirds out there, continue to love each other. And for those that don't have a significant other, keep looking. There is someone out there for you. I'm John Johnson, and you're listening to Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast. Thank you for joining me.